Good morning, everyone. Okay, that's getting better. I'm one person, and I'm louder than all of you put together. Yes, I am. I have a big mouth. A booming voice. That's right, pulpit voice. Yeah, that came up, what was it? No, that was in the office. I laughed or something like that, which I tend to laugh boisterously, and someone was a bit surprised. Okay, that aside, we are continuing on the Gospel of John. Last week we talked about the woman at the well. And I think we'll skip over the royal official because we kind of touched on him. We could do a lot more with the woman at the well, just like we could do more with poor Nicodemus. Because, that's Nancy, by the way, giving the... See, you're not up on Nicodemus. Well, but this goes back to, what I burdened you with a couple weeks ago, reading a little bit about my master's thesis on the use of water in the Gospel of John as a way of teaching about baptism. And that's another thing we could do this morning, but it ties together. But you had the woman at the well, and you have the introduction of the phrase living water. That Jesus, you have the contrast between the Jacob's well and her bringing her empty jars to fill them, and Jesus with the offer of living water. That was in chapter 4. We're gonna do chapter 5 today. Otherwise we will be here forever. Which isn't a bad place to be in Gospel of John. So we had Nicodemus, we had the woman at the well. We're gonna skip the royal official, but you see there in those three stories, you have first century Jew, Samaritan, Gentile. And we circle back at the beginning of that story about the royal official. Where does Jesus go to? Where does he return to? Galilee and Cana, and we're told where he made the water wine. So in this subsection of John's Gospel, those are bookends. So you have, he makes travels in a circle from Cana, where he does his first sign, turning water into wine, to back to Cana, where he heals the royal official's son. So, sort of breaking apart as a literary elements, that these are designed to tie these stories together. Sort of like, I just am admiring your lovely necklace, Jan. Sort of like these stories, Cana and Cana are like the clasp. And then these stories go around and they're like the stones or pieces of a necklace. That's a good analogy. I'll have to remember that one. Let's file that one away. So chapter 5, we have the healing at the pool of Bethesda, or Bethsaida, Bethzazah, I think are the three options in the different manuscripts. And if I remember, yeah, Rita.
Well, I just have a question back on the royal official. It never hit me before, but does that mean he was a Roman?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily a Roman. Probably, I'd have to look up in a commentary, but I'm just guessing he probably was, worked in the court of King Herod. I don't know if that's Herod Agrippa or one of the Herods. So, but good question. So we have another story here, and in a sense, we have another one of these necklaces or bookends, because we have a healing at the pool of Bethesda. Can you think of what happens in chapter 9? Flip ahead to chapter 9 really quick.
Oh, the man born blind.
Yeah, pool of Bethesda. And pool of Siloam. Right?
You're gonna have to use black if you have it.
Yeah, let's see if this one works. Okay, you have these two pools. And like I said, it's sort of like the necklace. You have these two hasps that connect things together in between these chapters. And here you have a paralytic. He can't walk, right? And here you have a man born blind. So you could piece through, and I've done this. I actually wrote a short paper on this to, I gave it at the seminary, at the symposium, during the little short exegetical papers that are held at the wee hours of the morning and only a handful of people show up. But I feel good about myself. You know, and that's amazing. I've done it twice. So, no, 3 times. I've done it 3 times. Fat lot of good it did me, but anyway, you can compare these two stories because what happens in both cases? You have, well, here I go again. I'm answering my own questions. What is, just from your general knowledge of these two stories, what are some parallels that you can draw between them?
They're both healed.
Yeah, they're both stories of healing, physical healing. And they're both Jewish, first century Jews. They're centered around a pool of water, and here again, this is where I sort of pick up that, it's not that the paralytic was baptized. He doesn't even get into the water. The blind man, he doesn't climb in the pool, but he washes his eyes. Now, I don't think they had the white canes. Odds are someone, Jesus tells him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. Point me in the right direction. Odds are someone took him there and helped him, because otherwise, how would he find it? Most likely. But here we have the symbol of, not only do we have water, is common to both, which, here again, to me, that's blink, 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 blink. We're going to learn something about baptism. Okay? Like I said, it's not that the paralytic was baptized. It's not that the man of Siloam was baptized. It's just that water acts as a mental flag to cue you in. Also, here we have with the blind man, we have the symbol of light. And what does Jesus say in chapter 9 as that story is introduced? Let me see, I think it's chapter...
He says, I am the light of the world.
I am the light of the world. Okay, so now this statement, I am the light of the world, we have this story that illustrates just how he is the light of the world. He restores not just physical sight, but more importantly, as if you remember the story of the healing of the blind man, he, like the Samaritan woman, he comes to Jesus in stages. And eventually he sees spiritually, at the end of chapter 9, Jesus interacts with the Pharisees. You look at the end of chapter 9. The Pharisees ask a question, a small group of them. I think Jesus makes a statement and they reply. Yeah, they ask, are we blind too? And Jesus says, well, you claim to see. If you didn't, then your sin wouldn't remain. But because you claim to see, your sin remains. And there again, that word sin comes up. Well, we have light, so this story is bracketed, bookends again, by the image of light, where the blind man, he's in the dark, right? And by the end, he's in the light. These Pharisees, even though they can physically see, they are what? Spiritually blind. You see the interplay here, the contrast. Here again, we could, Nancy. Nicodemus, yeah, because he comes to Jesus when? In the night when it is dark, when you don't see the physical light of the world, which is the sun, right? So you could go through and in parallel columns compare the blind man to Nicodemus. Back to Bethesda, and I've sketched this out, the different parallels. I probably missed some. And not only look for parallels, but where they diverge.
I was going to say another parallel. The healing for both of them got the person that was healed in trouble with the rulers. And
Yes.
What you can't do that with the man, the paralytic. The problem was Jesus cured him on the Sabbath, and he was carrying his mat on the Sabbath, which was breaking the law.
Yeah, and I believe if you look in John 9, Jesus is coming out of the temple. If it wasn't the Sabbath, it was a high feast day. But odds are, it's also on the Sabbath. You'd have to double check that. I'm going to put in a question mark because just off the top of my head, I don't know that. But you're right.
Yeah, it's verse 14.
9:14?
Yeah, now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath.
Okay. So Jesus is healing on the Sabbath, which...
He's working.
Yeah, he's working. And this will come up again... Oh... My Father is working and I am working 2, something like that. I think it's maybe chapter 14 or 12. Mine is, I can't picture it. But yeah, so you have this interpretation of the Sabbath and what the Sabbath is really about, true rest.
Well, Jesus also put himself in it by making blood with his feet, spit.
Yeah.
And then told him to go wash. So
You kind of wish he was a little closer to the pool. He could have dipped his fingers
well,
and not, but
well, Jesus does a lot of that.
yeah, he does. Yeah, there was another instance where he does that. Yep.
And so it is something of him that he is putting into it.
Yeah.
That it overlooks, well, I think it's more significant that Jesus put himself into it than doing it on the Sabbath.
That's that is a great insight, Faith. Wonderful insight. It kind of takes away some of the you factor, but Jesus puts himself in. Puts himself into the dirt, into the mud, and he performs a healing. And I had read this before, but I hadn't quite thought of it that way, which is a great way to, that here part of Jesus, his spittle, is actually in the mud. So you have this earthly, there's nothing more earthly than dirt, an earthly, physical, tangible sign, something physical, to which Jesus adds himself. Is it still mud? Yeah, it's still mud. But it's also, is it Jesus? It's Jesus. What does that sound like? Communion, also.
Well, baptism.
Baptism,
It's
yeah.
water and
Water, yeah. That's a different kind of water. I didn't bring that up in my paper.
Okay.
I wasn't quite sure what to do with the whole. But thank you for solving that for me, Faith. This, in broad terms, in dogmatic theology, in doctrine theology, we talk about words. There's the broad use and the broad use and the narrow use. So a word can be, the gospel in broad use is all the stories, all the accounting, which includes both law and gospel. In the narrow sense, the gospel is the doctrine of justification. So broad, narrow. Broadly speaking, this is sacramental. It is sacramental. God acts sacramentally through physical means. So, just like in the flood, what was the physical means? The water. The Israelites leaving Egypt, what was the physical means?
Well, they had to cross the Red Sea.
Well, they had to, cross the Red Sea, but God's presence.
Yeah.
The columns of light and dark.
The columns of smoke and fire. So it's more than just light and dark. It's physical. God works in this world sacramentally through means. And now that's broad. Narrowly, in a more narrow sense, we have the sacraments: baptism, the Lord's Supper, and the stepsister absolution. I say stepsister because you have water, bread, and wine. What's the physical element? You could make the argument that it is the voice of the pastor, or outside the divine service, a brother or sister in Christ speaking to you God's words of forgiveness, if you want to say a physical sign. But so God acts sacramentally, as opposed to just, without needs. Very good. I love that. Jesus puts himself into the mud. Oh, that is just beautiful, Faith. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of your mouth. So the Sabbath, Jesus fulfills the Sabbath. The purpose of the Sabbath is to give rest. The Pharisees, they got so nitpicky about Sabbath observance. And so just this guy simply taking his mat and going home. The healings, both healings, get the person who is healed into trouble and gets Jesus into trouble. I think it's at the end of the Pool of Bethesda healing in 5 where it says that they persecuted Jesus even more so because he did this on his Sabbath. You'd have to scan through chapter 5 and it'll say that, I believe.
Verse 16.
16.
Verse 16. Okay. Again, another parallel. We may end up covering John 9 today as well. So we have the theme of persecution because of identity with Jesus. Okay? Persecution. And the healed and the healer. That's arrow, but H and H. Now we get to, and there's probably other parallels that we could point out, but I want to get to where the parallel breaks down, where they go different directions. How does the paralytic, when he's confronted, what does he do? Scan through that chapter. Yes, read it.
Well, he says that he refers to him, that Jesus is the man that had healed me. He told me to get up and that I could carry my mat and go.
Yeah, the Nuremberg defense, right? I was just following orders. No, actually, that needs to be a German. I was just following orders. Has to be a German accent. Carl's trying to learn all kinds of accents. How was that? Was that a good Scottish accent, Dad? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Is that a good cowboy accent? You bet. You bet. I think he took over the steppes of Russia last week. I forget.
Well, the paralytic, first of all, the Jews asked the man
Who healed
who
them?
did this, and the man really didn't know. It's at 13. The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was with there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." Then the man went away and told the Jews it was Jesus.
Okay.
So, first of all, he said, "I don't know, this guy just told me to pick up the mat and I could."
Yeah.
And Jesus later came back and found him and said, "Oh, I see you're
Right.
walking."
And where does he find him?
Temple.
In the temple. Yeah. And now remember, who is the temple?
Jesus.
Jesus. So that comes into play too. Yeah, this is pretty significant. He doesn't know. Now, somebody heals you. Yeah, Jesus slipped away, but you're paralyzed for how many years?
38.
38. I don't know if you can make a lot of hay out of this, but how long were the Israelites in the desert? 40 years, but they spent about the first 2 years before they rejected the promised land, so 38 years.
Yeah.
So he's
In the desert.
and he's paralyzed. He can't
Get out of it.
He can't see or enter the
Promise.
kingdom of God, just like
Nicodemus.
Nicodemus. That's right.
But I have a question.
Yes.
In this first part of chapter 5, the blind,
Paralytic.
the paralytic man must have known about Jesus.
You would think.
Because Jesus never says, I am he, I am Jesus, I am the light of the world, nothing to this paralyzed man. He heals him, and then he sees him again at the temple. You know, so how does the blind man know that it is Jesus?
Well,
I mean, the paralytic.
yeah, the paralytic. Well, he doesn't know until his second encounter with Jesus.
Right.
Then he finds out.
But he must have known who Jesus was and that Jesus was doing these miracles to be able to recognize him at the temple.
Jesus found him, he didn't find Jesus. Yeah. So he doesn't know who healed him. Which seems kind of strange because you would think you'd want to know.
Yeah, because Jesus asked him earlier, do you want to be healed?
Yeah. And what does he tell Jesus?
He says, there's nobody to put me in the pool.
Nobody put me in the pool. So he's not even thinking that Jesus could heal him. He's focused on the pool. And there's a textual variant that is probably not in this translation that explains the whole pool thing. If you're familiar with the King James, yeah, it's in the footnote, yeah. There was an angel that would come down and stir the water. So if you saw the water bubbling, that meant that the angel had come down imperceptibly, and it was at that time whoever got in the water first was healed. Everybody else shucks out of luck. Day late, dollar short. Okay? He's a paralytic. I'm sure he's trying to get there as close to the pool as he can to be the first one in. It's like kids wanting to be the first in the door. You can imagine this going on, that, you know, if the first one is healed, you can see people kind of pushing and shoving to get in, right?
I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred.
Yep, when the water stirred, and this line explains the whole thing. Oh, there is this, so he's actually at the pool. Is the blind man at the pool of Siloam? Does he start out there? Where is the blind man? He's not sitting by the road and crying. Blind man sat by the road and he cried.
As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth.
Yeah, where is Jesus coming from?
The temple.
The temple. Jesus is leaving the temple. The blind man, what was he doing there outside the temple?
Probably begging for alms.
Probably begging for alms, because very often that's where you go. It's sort of like you go to San Martin coming out of Walmart, right?
You know, they must have stopped that because there hasn't been anybody there for a while.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they probably.
Yeah, they went somewhere else.
Well, protect your territory, and But, yeah, so he's there to receive alms. And he receives much more than alms. But he's not at the pool, he's directed to go to the pool. This guy is at the pool of Bethesda, and Jesus, who is the true Bethesda, ends up healing him. Jesus doesn't come along and push him into the water, does he? Oh, the water's stirring, there you go. No, he heals him with the word. So you have, here again, you could contrast Jesus and the pool of Bethesda. He's the greater pool, the reservoir, well, more than a reservoir. He's the source of living water. This pool of Bethesda is not living water. Living water on a literal sense, you know, if it's living water, it's not dead water. Dead water is stagnant, yeah. Living water is moving. So if you found, it's the difference between finding sort of swamp water as just that's stagnant, as opposed to a stream. Life flowing, life giving, life sustaining. So the stirring of the water took this water in the pool, made it living, because now it's agitated, and that was the signal that now you can get life, restoration of health from that pool. Jesus, though, is the true Bethesda. I mentioned there's, in the different manuscripts, there are some different spellings. Bethesda, Bethsaida, I think, and then Zappa, okay? So, I mean, which one is it? Well, it's kind of hard to tell. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, which predate the New Testament, I think there's a reference to this Beth-Zappa. So anyway, usually it's translated House of Mercy. So we have Bethesda Ministries, right? House of Mercy. I think it's the Bethesda, which means house. Beth is house in Hebrew. And it's this back part that you have some differences. House of the twin flowing. So, you know, two water sources that, you know, flow together. The Pool of Bethesda, which they found archaeologically, and also the Pool of Siloam, they know where both of these were located. It had 5 columns. And it was a 2-layer pool. So you had water that would come in, and then it would flow from the top pool down to the bottom pool. One possibility, and I think this, part of it depends on who built this thing. One possibility, you got to be a little careful with numbers, because sometimes they're symbolic, sometimes they're not. But you have 5, the number 5. What does the number 5 bring to mind? It had 5 columns to provide for the canopy over the pool. Think Old Testament, the number 5.
It's called
What?
the Decalogue, the 5.
Decalogue, Deca is 10.
Then it's the Pentateuch.
The Pentateuch, yeah. Penta, like Pentagon, is 5. The Pentateuch,
The first 5 books of the Old Testament.
first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Written by Moses.
The books of Moses. Moses! That's from the movie Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille, right?
Which I've never seen.
You haven't seen it? Oh, you've got to. Yeah. I'm not going to spoil it for you.
I know that.
It's like the Passion of the Christ. Spoiler alert, tomb's empty. Okay, yeah, it's Moses. Now, I say that there's some credibility to this because architecture is often symbolic, right? You express certain things through structure. And I don't know why, but the Pentagon is, who in the world would build a 5-sided building? You imagine being the contractor? I mean, who builds a roof like the one we have over our sanctuary?
An architect with too much leeway.
Well, an architect who's trying to make a point visually, it looks like a wave, right? So, the construction workers were probably cussing under their breath, trying to shingle this thing. So there's a possibility that here we have Moses. Siloam, if I remember correctly, is a variant of basically peace. Shalom, Shlomo. You know who Shlomo is in the Old Testament? Who's Shlomo? Solomon. See, you have the S, the L, and the M. Sh or S or sh, there's the same letter depending on, it looks like this. Depending on whether the dot is there or there, means it's either S or SH. So Shalom. David was a son of blood. He was a man of war. Solomon, however, was a man of peace. He was a Shlomo. And it doesn't mean that he was a Shlomo. He was a man of peace, and his reign was characterized by peace. Siloam, I think, is a variant of that, meaning, so you have, on the one hand, you have Moses, the pool Bethesda, the house of twin flowing, potentially, or house of mercy. Jesus is the true Bethesda. Even though the man doesn't look to Jesus for healing, he's still stuck on the pool, just like who are the Pharisees still stuck on? Moses. And this will come up again. Moses comes up in the story of the pool of Siloam, but this time in terms of discipleship. What do the Pharisees tell the man in chapter 9? Or the man in chapter 9, he asks them a question. About 2/3 of the way through. The man born blind asks them a question after they've interrogated him. Well, they did, but towards the end of the story, the blind man asked the Pharisees a question. No, they say, he asked them, who do you think he is? Well, he's a prophet. He's a teacher.
Verse 27, he says, do
Do
you want to become his disciple?
you want to become his disciples too?
Why are you asking this?
Right. Do you want to be his disciple too? So the blind man wants to become a disciple. This guy, he betrays Jesus. Now, whether he just does it because he's an idiot, well, Jesus is the one who healed me. I just found out. Talk to him. You go talk to him. Or whether he basically an ingrate and he sells Jesus out, and as a result, they persecute Jesus. This man wants to be a disciple. He wants, how do you make disciples? Two things. Baptizing and teaching. He wants to become a disciple. This is pointing towards baptism. Early church, baptism, and we do it here with the candle. They were called enlightened ones because they have come into and are walking in the light of the world, the true light. And how do the Pharisees respond to the blind man?
Insult.
Well, they insult him, but what did they specifically say? Read it.
They called Jesus a sinner.
That was right before this. How do they respond to this man when he says, do you guys want to be disciples too? What do they say right after that?
They're disciples of Moses.
We're disciples of Moses. We're stuck back here. We're stuck at the pool of Bethesda. We're ignoring the true pool of Bethesda, the true house of mercy, or the interesting thing is if it's the twin flowing, what flows from Jesus' side at the crucifixion? Water and blood. It's a twin flowing. It's a house of Bethesda, or Bethesda, or whatever it is. You see how, this is just incredible, isn't it? Oh, gives me shivers. I gotta stop saying, catch myself doing that, especially if you watch yourself, you find all kinds of bad things. So they're still stuck on Moses. The blind man, he's gone beyond Moses. Now he wants to be a disciple of Jesus. He wants to walk in the light. And now, interestingly, this guy, he doesn't know Jesus, just like who else doesn't know Jesus?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't know where this guy came from. Yeah.
That seems a little curious to me, right? It says, we know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. How do they know? Because it was about Moses, because it was written down and they're well versed in
Right.
stories. Well, so was Jesus, because Jesus coming, predicted over and over and over, and they didn't catch that?
Remember Nicodemus, he was a Pharisee. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was the teacher of the Jews. And yet, he comes to Jesus at night. He's in the dark. It isn't until the end of the gospel there's hope for Israel. You know, the best of the best didn't get it. He came to his own place, and his own people did not receive him.
So they are the most well-versed of anybody in the holy writings and scriptures.
Yep.
And yet,
They done get it.
and so they are blind.
They are blind, and their sin remains on them. Whereas this poor blind man who was blind from birth, how much do you think he knew? Probably not a whole lot. Yeah. Rita.
Not a lot, but he knew, he finally, after the Pharisees were talking and all that, he finally said that he knew that he had to be from God, that he could.
Yeah. He may be blind or was blind, but he can figure out, hey, if somebody can open eyes of a blind man, you know, at the very least, and you can look through what he says about Jesus. And here again, he grows. His understanding of who Jesus is, it's, you know, the light dawns and then it gets brighter and brighter. He knows, this guy doesn't know. The blind man, though, knows Jesus did this, right? So at least he knows his name, but he doesn't know a whole lot about him necessarily. This guy, betrays Jesus. This guy wants to be his disciple. This guy, once he finds out Jesus, he sells him out. This guy, he doesn't sell Jesus out. Even though his parents, what? His parents throw him under the bus. He's of age, you don't go ask him.
Well,
Because of fear of the Jews.
yeah, because the Jews did,
Jewish authorities will be more politically correct.
they did throw him out.
Yeah, he gets excommunicated.
Yeah.
This guy, he doesn't get kicked out. This guy, he gets excommunicated. Now, and he grows he's a prophet. He's just like the Samaritan woman. He grows, he's a man sent from God. He's a prophet. I may not have the order. But eventually he wants to become a disciple. And then Jesus will ask him, the man, because he finds him just like he found this guy. And what does Jesus ask him?
Do you believe in the Son of Man?
And he says, because he isn't quite there yet, he's right on the cusp. How does he reply?
Who is he?
Who is he? Who is this Son of Man? And what does Jesus say?
You have seen him and he's speaking to you.
You have seen him and you are speaking to him, just like Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, right? We know the Messiah, when he comes, I am he. So the blind man, he drops to his knees, and what does he say to Jesus in response?
I believe, Lord, I believe.
Lord, I believe. He makes a confession. That confession, a little bit later on in the early church, prior to baptism, teaching for adults, part of the baptismal liturgy, which is still part of the liturgy, is you confess the Apostles' Creed and then are baptized. We do the same thing. The Apostles' Creed is the creed of the baptized. And so in Luther's morning and evening prayer, that if you use that in the morning, say in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, remembrance of baptism, then recite the creed of the baptized, and then say the Lord's Prayer, the prayer of the baptized. Because only the sons and daughters of God can address God as our Father. Now, Sandy, you had made the comment to me once, and it's not about at a church where they only use the Nicene Creed, and they don't use the Apostles' Creed during the service anymore, right? Which, there again, it's not something to be dogmatic over. The rationale is the Apostles' Creed is the creed of the baptized, I believe, right? The Nicene Creed is the creed of sort of the communion, us, we. So how do we begin the Nicene Creed? We believe. And so it's usually on Sundays when we do not have communion, like this morning, which creed did we use? Apostles. The Apostles. On Sundays that we have communion, which creed do we use? The Nicene. Historically, there's a connection between the use of the Nicene Creed and Holy Communion, where we are gathered as that church in that place. Whereas the Apostles' Creed is associated with baptism, Nicene Creed with communion. Now, that said, you don't have to be dogmatic about it. And there's something to be said for alternating between, so otherwise, what's liable to happen? You forget the Apostles' Creed, right? Probably an argument to use the Athanasian Creed more often, because we only use the... Jan is shaking her head vigorously. We use the Athanasian Creed, unfortunately, only once a year,
Trinity Sunday.
Trinity Sunday. And, you know, that's the long one. And it's a fuller explication of God as triune, and that's why we use it then.
Well, I'm not sure exactly when the Apostles' Creed came into being, but I do know the Nicene and the Athanasian came out of clearing up heresies. The Nicene, I forget which heresy that was. That
Yeah,
was
Arian.
Arian.
Primarily the Arian, but others thrown
Yeah,
in.
and then the Athanasian was a fuller explanation of
Yeah.
all three in one, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Apostles' Creed,
They say that's the oldest one, and if somebody asks you what you believe,
yeah. You don't have to rattle it off verbatim, but,
it's all there.
okay, there's your evangelism training.
Yeah.
You got what you need, so what do you believe?
I believe in God.
I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't recite it verbatim, but you're equipped to give an answer for the hope that is in you, don't you?
Yeah.
The Apostles' Creed, the earliest version, because it changed a little, you know, word here, word there, called the Old Roman Creed. They think around 100 AD-ish.
Wow.
It's early, very early. Tradition, which there again, maybe yes, maybe no. The tradition is that all 12 apostles, now this, not Judas, but Matthias, I think, we got to trust in the Holy Spirit knowing what he's done. But justice, I was pulling for justice. I was, not Matthias. They already had Matthew, you know. But tradition is that they were sitting around and thinking, well, we need a Reader's Digest condensed version of what we believe. So Peter gets up and he says, I believe in God the Father Almighty. And then John or whoever, and in Jesus Christ our Lord. Or maker of heaven and earth. Anyway, all 12 chipped in a phrase, and so it's the Apostles' Creed.
That's the only creed that he descended into hell.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Although it might be in the Athanasian. But, yeah, the descent into hell. So it's the Apostles' Creed. Now, whether they each chipped in a phrase, it encapsulates the teaching of the apostles. Very short, easily memorized. That was confessed before someone was baptized very early on, early church. Then the Nicene Creed came out in two stages. 325 at the Council of Nicaea, so Nicene, and it was in response to a particular heresy called Arianism. Arius, who was a bishop, I believe, denied the full divinity of Jesus, is what it comes down to. And so that's why you have more, it's an expansion. They took the Apostles' Creed and expanded it a bit. In particular, in the middle part, the second article. We divide the creed up into three, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Before they divided it up into 12 because of 12 apostles and all that. Later on in, I think it's 381, not 481, they had a follow-up at Synod in Chalcedon. So it's called the Niceno-Chalcedonian, Creed, technically. We go Nicene. And so they expanded it a little bit clearer because there were still some ongoing problems. I think it was 481. I think so. And it was a way, the creeds, one function was to confess what we all agree on. The other function is like, what is that all that game where you have the hammer and you whop the gopher?
Whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole, okay, a mole, it's like whack-a-mole. Those who would not say the creed, or, well, it's like Pledge of Allegiance, right? Originally, it did not have the phrase, under God. That was added, I think, in the 1950s, right? 53, okay. I wasn't alive, so I... Similar thing, if someone, and this was I think there was kind of a dust up at the DNC, right? Where they, in some of the subgroups, they omitted under God, and so it made the papers and all that. Similar thing, creeds in the church, those who disagreed would not say of one substance with the Father by whom all things were made. Arius could not say that. Followers of Arius could not say that. So if you're gathered as the church and he's there and he's not saying something, whack-a-mole, he's a heretic. You go to a Roman Catholic church, right, for a funeral, let's say, or a wedding. And you're participating for the most part, and then they go into invocation of saints or Hail Mary. So what do? Well, I can't pray to St. Christopher. I can't, do the Hail Mary, so I'm not gonna make a scene. I'm gonna sit here quietly. Guess what? Oh, I know, the one that really makes you stick out like a sore thumb. The Lord's Prayer. Yeah. Because we have, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. They don't say that.
Sometimes the newer churches, newer Catholic churches.
They are, okay. But old school, you go, you're praying along, and then for thine is the king. Because, they're not a Roman Catholic. I mean, that was another function of the creeds, was to identify, to root out the heretics, basically. So creeds, they sort of form a border between in and out, believer or either unbeliever or misbeliever. And so he makes bringing it back around, do you believe in the Son of Man? He makes a creedal statement, I believe. So most likely after that, he was baptized and became a disciple. This guy doesn't make any confession whatsoever. Yeah.
Is there anything to be made of the fact that the one didn't have a direct relationship with Jesus? I mean, Jesus said, get the map and get out. Whereas the other guy had the mud, which would impart him into there. I'm just.
Yeah,
trying to see the difference between the
Yeah,
two.
I mean, some of these we may not want to press, but it's a possibility as you think about this. Now, the other thing, I did a paper on this as well. I'll tell you, writing papers is like giving birth. I was asked to do a book review for every now and then you get asked to do that for the seminary journal. Oh man, that was like 3 days in labor. Finally got it done.
You do not know what you're talking about.
No, I don't know what I'm talking. Metaphorically. The other thing, and we'll close on this because I'm over time. The title of my paper was the fancy word, because you use fancy words when you're trying to impress. The cruciform character of discipleship. Well, the cross pattern. Discipleship is, Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. You can draw, again, parallels between Jesus and the blind man. As a disciple, as one who is living out his baptism. Jesus is rejected by his own, right? His own people. And that's primarily, the religious authorities, but also the hoi polloi, many in the general populace. What happens to the blind man when he's interrogated? Oh, trial also. Jesus goes through a trial, right? And is condemned. Who do they bring up first? Well, they talk to him first, and then who do they talk to? Mom and Dad, right? His own people.
And they say, go ask, he's of age, go ask him.
They throw him under the bus. He's rejected by his own parents out of fear of the Jewish authorities. Ultimately, he's excommunicated, which is spiritually a death sentence. Remember the Neil Diamond? What movie was that? What does his father do? He rips his coat. He's dead. My son is dead to me. He severs the ties of father and son. He's excommunicated, death. But there's resurrection, isn't there? Isn't there? Oh, it's just give me chills all over. This is so beautiful. So, our lives as disciples, well, you have this contrast. Some Jews rejected Jesus, some believed. Some are like the blind man, or the paralytic. Some are like the blind man. Now here again, both of them were physically impotent, unable to do anything for themselves. It's all one-sided from Jesus, their salvation. Okay, now which one are you going to be? Are you, who are reading or hearing this gospel, are you going to risk, especially if you're Jewish, are you willing to risk being excommunicated? In the latter part of the first century, they had Council of Jamnia, which I don't know if they had like blueberry or strawberry. It was like IHOP. Council of Jamnia, they passed what are called the 18 benedictions. One of the benedictions, here it's like creedal, is a condemnation of basically Christians. Now, if you were a Christian, but one secretly, like who? Well, sort of. Halfway through, yes, he's getting there, but who is with Nicodemus? Joseph of Arimathea, but he was one secretly for fear of the Jews. And that also comes up, I think, in chapter 12. That there were those who believed in him, but out of fear, didn't do so publicly. Are you willing to stay in the synagogue and speak these 18 benedictions, one of which includes a condemnation of Christians? Are you going to be like the paralytic and deny Jesus, or are you willing to be kicked out of the synagogue for confessing Jesus as the Son of Man?
Well, if you've confessed him as the Son of Man, you've changed your religion. So, other than if there's some other penalties, but just getting thrown out of the synagogue would be a good thing.
Early on, the line between church and synagogue was kind of blurry. Where does Paul go to preach usually?
The synagogue.
The synagogue.
Because that's where people that believe in God.
That's where all the Jews gathered, yeah.
And everybody else was a pagan that believed in
Right.
a lot of God.
It was very similar to today, where you have churches, but you have Methodist, Baptist, Lutheran, Pentecostal, whatever. It was the distinction between church and synagogue wasn't hard and fast. Jewish Christians were still going to synagogue. They were still going to the temple. Where are the disciples teaching before they're kicked out?
Temple.
They're going to the temple. It's still kind of mixed together. But are you going to say these 18 benedictions and then you're whack-a-mole and boom, now you're kicked out, you're dead? Yeah.
Well, that's sort of like today, if you are a Christian, you're made fun of, or you're criticized, and they try to
Intimidate.
take
Yep.
away the Christ.
Okay.
And that's one thing that Christ will not let, God will not let his word be denied.
Yep. Now the question for you is, confronted in this situation, what are you going to do? Are you going to be like the paralytic? Or are you going to be like the blind man? There's a very, I don't know the best adjective. Poignant isn't quite there. Inspirational in a sort of a horrific way. The Columbine shooting, remember? And one of the shooter goes up, "Do you believe in Jesus?"
She said yes, and she was dead.
He pulled the trigger. She was the blind man.
Well, we've got it now, and sometimes people outside of the true church believe we have, not in America, we don't have freedom of religion, we have freedom of worship, because they are saying you can't take what you believe and put it into the public forum. In other words, we don't believe in same-sex marriage, so you have a bakery and you say, we'll make you a birthday cake, but we won't make you a wedding cake.
It's the politician's weasel answer. I personally don't believe in it, but who am I to impose my beliefs on others? And they're trying to reinterpret the Constitution of
And in other words, your religion is only when you're in this building, in your church. It's for an hour or two on Sunday morning. Do not bring it out.
Right.
Do not live it outside those confines.
It's the old, frog in the pot of water.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. It's uncomfortable. Boy, this water's kind of warm. Boy. But they're not coming around breaking your fingers,
No.
are they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very subtle and easy to, okay, it's just this, it's not asking too much. Well,
Yeah, they're taking away your livelihood.
then you get frog soup.
Yeah.
Yeah. We better stop. Yes. Well, yeah, we can't do it ourselves. It's, the power of the Holy Spirit working in and through us. But more and more, there was, what was it? There was a Roman Catholic, I think a bishop or a cardinal, something like that. He made the statement a couple of years ago, I'm going to die in my bed. My successor will die in jail or something like that, and his successor will suffer a martyr's death. It was something, this progression. And we're in the early stages of this, but there's not a big ask, so that it's so easy to give in, right? And anyway, have a wonderful week, everybody.